Hello everyone, a very good evening. Hope you guys have watched my previous video regarding the English grammar in use module. So, hey everyone, I am Ankita and I am your course instructor for spoken English. So, let's move towards our today's course, which is Basics of Communication and Line Construction. So, first of all, let's head towards basics of communication. The ability to speak and communicate is the only difference which the animals and human beings have. So it's due to this effectiveness and the communication skills that humans interact with one another as a social being. For a person to progress well in society, only merits are not enough and only qualifications don't work. The person has to have a powerful communication skills so that he or she can put across to others what he wants them to do. It's not fine about the communication skills, but the question is how to improve and what all it includes. So the following are the major tips you must follow for being a good communicator. Number one is maintain eye contact. Maintaining eye contact is always the best tip you can say. It's due to the eye contact that you can get to know people and you can make them involved within the conversation. Through eye contact, you can always watch the body posture of the people also. And their body posture can give you much more information whether they are interested in the communication or not. The next advice is use gestures. Gestures are also a vital important part of communication. For example, when we show our hands like this, it shows a movement and it helps us to navigate and it also draws the attention of the audience. But yeah, we have to keep in mind that we don't need to make it unnecessary movements so it would look like annoying. The next is build vocabulary. This tip we will discuss in the next slide in detail. And the last tip for the good communication is practice, practice, and practice. Because we all know that practice makes a person better. So, practice is all what we can do to improve our communication skills. So, now let's head towards how to build your vocabulary. The number one rule is learn the roots of words. That is, to build a strong foundation for your vocabulary, it is helpful to understand your root of words. For example, many words have a common root and a prefix or a suffix that helps you determine what the meaning might be. For example, when a word includes the root duck, a Latin word that means to make or lead, you can assume that the root refers to the Latin definition. You will see this root in words like produce or deduce. The next tip is focus on practical terms and words. Some industries might have different definitions for words or use entirely new words, which we call in technical language as technical jargon. So, if your co-workers and others in your field use technical jargon, try focusing on building a vocabulary around that to incorporate these words within your daily lifestyle also. For example, some industries use the word stand up to mean a short daily meeting. You can also look for clearer ways to express yourself instead of relying on the glitches that may be difficult for others to understand or skew your meaning. For example, instead of saying get your foot in the door, you could use expand your opportunities. The next tip that we have is create word associations. Word associations can help you to remember certain word or phrases. For example, the word gargantuan means very large. Try creating a sequence with the words such as tiny, small, medium, large, giant, and gargantuan. Forming associations can help you recall words you are learning with much more ease. And these associations can also ensure that you remember the word for the very long term in the future. The next tip we have is complete regular vocabulary tests. There are many tests which you can find online also. for the vocabulary, and Google also provides vocabulary tests. So you can give these kind of tests to increase your vocabulary as well as learn new words. The next tip that we have is create group of words. So as you learn new words, as I've said, through Google and many other things, you can group them together by meaning. Like words having the same meaning, such as small, tiny, they are somewhat similar. So you can group these words and write it down at a place, at one place. By creating these groups, you can identify that what are the patterns, and it will make it easier for you only to incorporate these kind of things in your daily speech. For example, you might learn words like affirmative, efficacious, and decisive, which all means positive. So by grouping these words together, it becomes easier for you to recall their general meaning and how to use them in speech. The next tip that we has is identify word nuances. For example, it means that some words have the different meanings in different contexts. For example, nuisance is a word like frame, which have several meanings depending on the sentence that we are using. A frame could be a border also that surrounds our picture, we all know, or it could mean to outline or highlight a certain physical quantity. Frame can also, while using in a sentence, mean to let's use it in a sentence that she has been framed by them. It means she has been blamed or sort of put in a condition by them. So these kinds of words are known as nuances, which have different meanings according to the situation. The next tip that we have is identify words that share meanings. Different words often share the same or similar meanings, as we have uh, told earlier also, like in the grouping of the words also, that we can write them in the same column. So that is the tip, that identify the words that have the same meaning. The next is diversify what you read. As we all know that reading will definitely help if you are looking for a powerful vocabulary. So read whatever you can, like if you have interest in newspaper or e-magazines or anything sort of a thing, like poems, articles, passage writing, you can read anything and try to gain some words, try to figure out some words that you don't use daily, and write them down in your diary or wherever you write them, along with their meanings, and revise them daily, on a daily basis, once in the morning and next in the evening, so you will remember these words. The next is edit what you write. Edit what you write, you can have as a tip as whatever, like you have written an article, and then just read it through and see what all words you have repeated, and see whether you can change the words by the another words which have similar meanings. So these were all the tips which will help you to build a powerful vocabulary. Now let's move towards our next topic, which is sentence structure. So sentence structure is how all parts of the sentence fit together. Basic parts of a sentence are verb, subject, and object. Every sentence requires at least a verb and a subject. A verb is an action, and a subject is the noun that does that action. For example, I am waiting. In this example, I am waiting is the verb, and the subject is I. The exception to this rule is imperative sentences, such as command sentences, which only need a single verb. We can assume the subject is the person the speaker is talking to. For example, stop, exclamation mark, is a full sentence. So some sentences can add objects also, which are nouns that also participate in the action. So let's say you forget your calculator and you ask your friend to borrow these. So you will say something like this: my buddy lends me their calculator. In this example, lends is the verb and my body is the subject because they are lending, and the word calculator is the object. And it's divided, the object is divided into two parts. First is direct object, and the second is indirect object. Direct object is that on which noun that receives action, and the indirect object is noun that receives direct object. In the example which we have discussed, calculator is the direct object because in this it is the thing that is being lent. In the example, the indirect object is me. We have said my body lends me their calculator. So in this, me is the indirect object because it's the one who receives the calculator. So let's look at another example and try to identify the verb, subject, direct object, and indirect object. The example is Rohit passes Shruti the ball. So we can guess by the sentence only. It's very simple. The verb is passes because that's the action in the sentence. The subject is Rohit because Rohit is the person who is passing the ball. And the direct object is the ball because it is the thing that has been passed. And the indirect object is Shruti because Shruti has received the ball. So these were how we form a general sentence, keeping in mind subject, verb, and object. The next is types of clauses. So if every sentence were as simple as subject plus verb plus object, books would be so boring. So that's why English has developed a few different sentences structure to keep things interesting and give us many more options for speaking and writing. Before we go into these different sentence structure, it's crucial to understand how these clauses work. A clause. A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. Sometimes a clause is a complete sentence on its own, but the other times it needs help before it expresses a complete thought. So a clause that is complete sentence is called an independent clause, and the clause which is not a complete sentence it's called a dependable clause. For example, we will eat dinner at 5. It's a independent sentence. And for example that I have mentioned, the roads are icy because it rained last night. This sentence has two clauses. The first one is the roads are icy, and the second one is because it rained last night. And each sentence has a subject. The subject is the roads and it, and a verb are and rained. But we can see that only the first one is a complete sentence. In the example of dependable one, we have we will eat dinner at 5. It is dependable because in this we have a specified time mentioned that at 5, and it's a not complete sentence. So let's move towards our next topic, which is types of sentence structure. There are basically four types of sentence structure. There are basically four types of sentence structure. The number one is simple, that that has only one independent clause. The number second is compound, having two or more independent clauses. The number third is complex, which contains one independent clause plus one or more subordinate clauses. And the last one is compound complex, that has two or more independent clauses plus one or more subordinate clauses. So let's take a deeper look into each of them. The number first is simple sentences. Simple sentences are pretty simple, just like a single independent clause. No more, no less. This includes subjects and the verbs, but can also include objects. For example, life itself is the most wonderful fairy tale. It's a simple sentence. So the next is compound sentences. A compound sentence joins together two or more independent clauses into a single sentence. You can connect the independent clauses in two ways, using a comma and a coordinating conjunction between the clauses, or using a semicolon between the clauses. For example, it may seem difficult at first, comma, but everything is difficult at first. The next example is be yourself, semicolon, everyone else is already taken. The next type of sentence structure we have is complex sentences. A complex sentence uses one main independent clause with any number of subordinate clauses, while compound sentences use coordinating conjunctions to join the clauses together. Sentences use subordinating conjunctions to join the sentences. If the subordinated clause comes first, use a comma before the independent clause. If the independent clause comes first, you don't need a comma at all. For example, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. In this, after learns to write, we have comma. The next example is when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, comma, they distract themselves with pleasure. The last type of sentence structure is compound complex sentences. As the name suggests, compound complex sentences combine compound sentences with complex sentences. They require at least two independent clauses and at least one subordinate clause. To combine them, follow the specific grammar rules for each. Be sure you are using your coordinating conjunctions and subordinating conjunctions in the right places. For example, if you are going to be crazy, comma, you have to get paid for it, comma, or else you are going to be locked up. The next example we have for compound complex is don't aim for success if you want it, semicolon. Just do what you love and believe in, comma, and it will come naturally. So these were the type of sentence structure, and with this we have completed how to form a sentence and what are the clauses that we have to keep in mind. So that's all for today's class. Thank you for joining the session and hope you guys like it. If you guys have any doubts, then just leave them in the comments box, and do remember to join us for the next module on the next Tuesday, that is 15th of March.